Hello and welcome to Space Between Ideas. I'm Blaine Gates. Welcome again to this room. Looks like we are getting a lot of different rooms in this process. Welcome back. It is now day number 43. Congratulations, you have made it to day number 43. We are still discussing state styles. So this is like the fifth or the sixth? I think we've had a lot of checklists, and in this checklist we have been talking about a few different types of work styles. All right, so let me just show you where we're at. So, oh, what's that? All right, so we started this process in the nil category. So this is when we have a goal, but we're doing nothing to achieve it. Or we have a goal and there's some kind of behavior that we're showing, but we want to start to wind that down or eliminate it. And then we went from that to haphazard. So haphazard is where we are starting to meander while doing. So that's the case where we don't really know exactly how things should be running, or perhaps we've been following some kind of process. So remember, up here we are following a process. Now sometimes if you're following a process, then you might want to just like shake things up a little bit in order to what? In order to then move over to experimenting with a variety of different processes. Now, so like you can see how you can move around. Like maybe you have a process, you want to start to experiment with a new process. You have a process, you want to shake things up a little bit. You have a process, but you want to decommission that process. Maybe you're experimenting with a couple of processes, but you don't really like those processes for some reason, and you just want to kind of meander a little bit. So you can see how like you're constantly, I think most people spend most of their time, like if you've been working for a while, probably you spend the most of your time following a process and experimenting with a process. Well, yeah, also you start to wind things down, and then of course you're always throwing some craziness into the mix. So today we are going to talk about the next checklist. Now, as you can see, we have two checklists remaining in this process. And the first one we're going to talk about today is the $10,000 question. And then the last the last theme that we will talk about is going to be tomorrow, and that is the $1 million question. All right. So today we're just going to talk about the $10,000 question. Now, of course, now that I told you that there's a $1 million question, perhaps you're like, I don't even want to hear about the $10,000 question because that's not really important to me. Oh, wow, that's so big. So I should have measured it before. So if you've ever been to the Tretriskovskaya, I can't remember how to say it, it's a museum in Moscow, then you've seen that black square. So I'll mention that tomorrow. So do your homework and leave a comment below. What is the piece of art which is just a black square in the biggest, most famous museum in Moscow? It's not a brick wall, and it's also not today's theme. Now, what does this look to you? What does this look like? So as you know, like the other checklist that we've been looking, or the other themes that we've been looking at, there was one that was empty, there was one that was kind of weird and squiggly lines, there was, something about a process, there was something about some arrows, but the big difference between this theme and other themes is that, look, we have two squares at the top. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have two squares at the top? Now, if one square is one outcome, or you can say one result, then obviously two is two results. So this is like after you have somewhat of a process. Like I think this also represents a process. And the whole point of talking about state styles is to envision alternative ways of doing work. All right, so if you already have one outcome with your process, then the question is then, are you able to envision new ways of doing work so that you can get two outcomes with the same process? All right, so we call this embedded. embedded. This work style is called embedded. All right, so embedded means to blend into other work. Now, let me give you a couple of examples. So, really, like the most popular example, obviously, is an acquisition. So, an acquisition is when you have one company who gobbles up the other company. And what happens is you have to kind of blend these two companies together. And so, you have a process in one company and a process in another company, and those processes sometimes overlap. And then you can actually spend less money because you will probably end up firing one of those people. So, an embedded work style is the opportunity to get, well, I guess in this case, you're getting the same result with fewer people. All right, so maybe that's not the best example. I mean, that's a good example of blending two workflows into one, but possibly not the best example of how one workflow can achieve two outcomes. So let's think about what happens. So remember, we were talking about state inventiveness, and some of you guys have invented a new product or you have a new feature. Now, in both of those cases, obviously, with a new feature, you're going to have to blend it into your application, blend it into your product, and then your product will then be able to accomplish more, will be able to do more things. All right, so think about a car. Like before, we just had cars, and then we put in a navigation system, and now our cars can tell us where to go, and our cars became more efficient. So we got two outcomes with the same car. Or if you're just adding a product to your line of products, then you have a salesman who before maybe he was just selling one product. Now the same salesman can sell two products. All right. Well, how about the internet? I mean, like, look at these companies who are just gobbling up all of these companies. Like you have, um, you have e-commerce websites that are just completely destroying the brick and mortar real estate retail market because they are able to first they sell one product, and then the same website is selling two products, and then the same website is selling three products, and then 1,000 products, and then 10,000 products, and then millions and millions of products. The same website is blending all these different products and replacing all of these brick and mortar stores. Now, you can also look at it like these different types of software. So, like in the past, you might be using one type of like, all right, so look at Google. So they have like, I mean, how many different Google products do you use? How many Facebook products do you use? So do you use Instagram? Do you use Facebook? Do you use WhatsApp? Like, it's crazy. They're trying to curb the market for this aspect of the behavior in your life. And then you have Gmail, and then you have YouTube, and then you have Google, and then you have you have Google Drive, and then you have Google Maps, and you have all these different products. So they're blending all of these different services into one company, and they're able to help you get many, many more outcomes with maybe not the same product, but certainly with the same company. Now, how about employees? So as your employee improves their skills and abilities, then maybe you will start to give them more responsibilities. So they're able to achieve more outcomes, although they may have to alter their process to some degree. So let me give you the my favorite example for how to blend work, how to achieve two outcomes. All right, so let's go through from the very beginning. So first we start with nil, and we have a child that does not know how to ride a bike. So the first thing they do is meander. All right, so now they're like, okay, so maybe they jump on mom's exercise bike, and they're like, oh, okay, so this is what it means to pedal a bike. It's just one process, the pedaling. Then you have to blend that process in with something else. So then they jump onto a bike that has training wheels. Now they have to blend the pedaling and the steering. Next, they have to remove the training wheels and they have to start to balance. So now they're blending steering, pedaling, and balance into the same process. Now, I would say at this point, you are moving from meander while experimenting with processes. Now you have a solid process. It's called how to ride a bike. but you're only getting one outcome. You're only riding a bike. So then one day you turn whatever age, for me, it was like 6 or 7 years old, and your father says, "Hey, we're going to start to make some money." And it's like, what? What are you talking about? I'm 6 years old. And he's like, no, we're going to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and run around the neighborhood. And I say, hey, but I know how to ride a bike. And he says, okay, so ride your bike. So now I take this business of riding a bike, I take this business of delivering newspapers and this process of riding a bike, and I blend them together. So now I am both riding a bike and I'm making money. So this is my classic example for how to blend work. Now you can see how this is the $10,000 question, because if you are able to use your systems, your infrastructure, your staff, your resources, and you're able to achieve more outcomes, then obviously you are going to be able to make more money. Now, the last thing I wanted to say is that this idea of blending into other work, it reminds me of the state progress checklist. All right, so we were talking about like a process or experiment. So when you talk about experimenting with a process, or even meander while doing. So at some point, if you are researching a new product or a new process or a new subject, you're going to be doing some meandering, right? And then eventually that meandering is going to turn into some processes. You may be experimenting with a variety of different processes. And then you will have to choose your plans, all right? So we're in the middle section of the state progress checklist about how to form agendas. Eventually, you're going to choose a plan, and then you are going to perform the actions. That's the process. And this was what we were talking about yesterday. So after you have the scenarios, then you choose your plan, and then you are performing the action according to the process. Now, what about today? All right, so after you recognize the outcomes, then the next thing you need to do is what? You reuse aspects of the endeavor. You reuse aspects of what is happening in this endeavor, in this project. Maybe their resources, maybe their relationships, maybe it's knowledge. Those things are going to go back into the process of developing future scenarios. So, and at that point, you start to blend things together. All right, so thank you for tuning into Space Between Ideas. I'll see you tomorrow for the $1 million question. I'm Blaine Gates.